Thanks. Hi, everyone. Quite a bit to get through today, so I'll move pretty quickly, but hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end, or otherwise come find me during any of the breaks downstairs. We've got a table set up conveniently near the coffee guys. So where are we at with drones? There seems to always be some innovative or slightly frightening new use for drones popping up, like burning rubbish off power lines in China, or helping to shut down airports in the UK. Big things on the horizon, of course, are drone delivery and passenger drones that we've heard a bit about today. But I think these are going to take a while before they get through all the regulatory and societal hurdles and reach sort of ubiquity of use. What gets me excited, though, is that drones are already being used on a daily basis all around the country to capture some really incredible data, gain efficiency, and most importantly, to keep people safely on the ground and out of harm's way. We're past the initial hype and trial phases in this regard. Everyone's really just getting on with the business of making use of that data. You might have seen this before. It's the Gartner hype cycle. It stands true for most new technologies, where they go through this exponential rise in hype in the early days before everybody gets a bit disappointed and there's a excitement correction. Then a little while later, things start picking up again in terms of a wider adoption, understanding, and where real value can start to be had from that new technology. Gartner suggested in 2017 that we just started down that initial fall, and the other pink dot on there is our own prediction. We published an article earlier in the year that we're seeing all the signs that we're now past that initial hype bubble, and we're on our way to a broad demand for this sort of technology and service across a wide range of sectors, which of course includes local government. Here's a pretty typical project for us and the drones, large quarry site. So not the sort of place where you'd want to do a traditional survey, walking around the site, even if you weren't concerned about blasting snakes or being run over by massive machinery. It's quite a large area at about 400 hectares. So you'd probably be there for a few weeks to just survey the major features. And in contrast, the drones are on site for about 3 hours, and during that time we will have digitized every inch of the site. Using that data, they can analyze their stockpile volumes, track progress against their planning, measure gradients of the roadways for efficiency and safety, environmental monitoring, compliance issues, and so on. So for a visit of just a few hours, the client gets a range of positive outcomes from that one set of data across all their internal departments. That data also increases in value over time as you're able to review and track changes between monthly or quarterly surveys. And it's not one drone fits all, I'm afraid. So at the top left, we've got our internal or confined space inspection drone, getting inside culverts and tanks and things. The others up the top are the standard sort of multi-rotor drones, a small one and a larger one with multiple sensors on board, including thermal. Bottom left is basically a miniature helicopter. That gets used a lot in the sort of land remediation for spraying and seeding and things like that. And the others down the bottom there are our fixed wing or aeroplane style drones. Again, smaller and larger ones, depending on the size of the project. In terms of the work being done by the drones, it sort of fits into two broad categories. One being to inspect tall, large or inaccessible assets and infrastructure, and the other is to map large areas from above. So think of Google or Nearmap, but incredibly high resolution. So down to the millimeter level of detail if needed. So cracks in roadway, roof fasteners and such should still be able to be seen in those maps. The big difference from satellite or near-map data, though, is that it can be captured exactly when needed at very specific times. So on project milestones, or in a case like this, a regular survey of a new subdivision that we've been helping to track over the last 6 months. And we're covering some pretty large areas with the drones as well. This is a 5,000 hectare survey, an entire river and valley system for assessing a new dam. So from the data we provide, they can see what the high watermark is at any point around that valley based on where they put the wall and how tall it would be built. So it's obviously not just top-down mapping data, but full 3D terrain that we're producing. And a particularly good case for this is coastal monitoring and coastal erosion issues. So there's not really a good way of surveying that through traditional means, and you certainly wouldn't want to be walking around a collapsing cliff like that. But by sending the drones along, you get incredibly high resolution and accurate data sets. And if we do that on an annual basis, we can tell you where each individual rock has moved in between those surveys. So for all the councils here that have got coastal segments, just keep that in mind as a way of managing that very effectively. We're not just in the business of capturing lots of data and saying good luck with that, but analysing and assessing and reporting and producing tools and ways of people to get just the right information they need out of that at a few clicks of a mouse. Stockpiles are a great example. You just click around a stockpile and it tells you exactly how many cubes of material are in that. And landfill is the same thing in reverse. So we can tell you exactly how much airspace is remaining without needing to walk through the site at all, in amongst dangerous materials and compactors running back and forth over it. We just stand off on the sidelines, fly a drone over, and you get your answers straight out. This is a good example, mine site in Victoria that we've been flying every month for the past few years. They don't care about drones. They don't care about drone data. All they want is a simple report in their inbox every month telling them how much material is in each one of their stockpiles. So that's really what you need to be doing with drones is ignore the technology, cut to the chase, just how to produce great data outcomes from their use. And given the roads theme at the conference here, this is a good example. A couple of kilometres of roadway are being reworked and resurfaced, and had some pretty complex line markings. So the client had us survey those. They had a bit of a challenge, though, that we weren't allowed to overfly the road, but we've got a technique for doing that. So we can fly from off the sides and still produce a very accurate top-down map. And then we can draft up all the line marking, provide that back to their surveyors to replace on that roadway after the roadworks happen. The feedback on this was that our entire cost for getting there, capturing the data, processing it, and drafting up all the line markings was half the cost that they would pay just in traffic control if they were doing this traditionally by a surveyor on the roadway. So not only improving safety outcomes by keeping people off the road, but also reducing costs in the process. So that's all the mapping side of things, and from an inspection point of view, I'll just flip through these really quickly because they're more on the industrial side of things. But from a council perspective, in terms of tall assets, often comes down to lighting poles, so small ones around council property or sports fields, and much larger ones in the stadium context. So there's usually a compliance requirement around these, or anything that is above people that might fall down. So there's often an annual inspection required, and obviously putting up the drone is a lot quicker and cheaper than rope access or guys in a lift bucket. That's all the exciting things that we inspect from the sky, but what we tend to spend a lot of time doing is looking at roofs. And David's intro yesterday had a great example of the church roof needing inspecting, and as a one-off, it's a perfect solution to have one of the local kids put their drone up and take a look. Where we tend to get involved, though, is pretty large-scale inspections. So, for example, I think a property group within council, they can effectively outsource that whole problem to us of knowing what condition all the roofs are in. So we send them a bunch of reports like this, green boxes on the front, which they can ignore and only look at the orange or red ones. So we reduce a property inventory of, say, 300 buildings down to just a few cases which actually need attention. And they can be compared to the previous year report to see if it's time to take action. By avoiding putting people on the roof in the majority of cases, it's obviously improving safety, but also avoiding damage. So from what we see looking at all these roofs is a lot of the damage is being done by people walking on them. So particularly for older and corroded or asbestos roofs, if you can avoid people being up there, you're actually avoiding a lot of that damage being done. So you're getting a lot more life out of your roof by not stepping on it. So that's a quick overview of what sort of work the drones are doing, and now we'll dive in a bit more specifically around council and LGA environment. We've got lots of opportunities and good things we can be doing, but also some challenges, and we'll start with the challenges actually. So everyone asks about the rules and regulations. The major ones are keep away from airports, so 3 nautical miles or 5.5 kilometres from airports, and the most restrictive one is 30 metres away from people. So we're generally not doing any work in CBD Sydney for that reason, and as we get further and further out, it becomes less restrictive with what we can do. But often we need a spotter and doing a bit of pedestrian traffic control to make sure we're keeping people well away while we're doing our work, but we can normally get in and out pretty quickly. There's lots of other rules and regulations around it. That's just the simple major ones. So if you're developing an in-house drone program, just yeah, you really got to be sure that you guys are getting trained and licensed up properly to do that stuff, or potentially opening up a lot of issues. So yeah, the next point there is along those lines, risk. So we're reducing physical risk in a lot of cases, so keeping people out of harm's way and safely on the ground. But it is a whole new category of risk for council. So just be mindful of the compliance side of things, and crossing T's and dotting I's and making sure everyone knows the rules and they're doing things properly. Privacy is an adjacent issue to that. There's nothing specific in the privacy regs about drones, and there shouldn't be. They're just the next technology for how to capture imagery. So we've had all these concerns from satellite and helicopter and mobile phones. Each new technology that comes along is making it easier to invade privacy, I guess. But it's not really that technology's problem. It's just, you've got to be responsible with any technology. So don't be flying drones over people's backyards. We had one inquiry from a council to can we help them by assessing all the pool fencing in all their residents' houses. But we sort of highlighted that the residents probably don't want to see drones hovering low over their pool, with kids or them in their bathing suits. When you consider the privacy aspects, some of those issues that might seem like a really great use for drones, you just got to put that back on the shelf and have a bit more of a think about it. And then the data integration is actually the biggest challenge, and we'll look at that as its own section soon. Opportunities, lots of opportunities. Councils tend to be looking after fairly large areas of land, and they can be filled with assets. And the big theme of the conference here has been how to deal with all these aging assets. So obviously, if we can get around and cover a lot more ground with the drone and cover lots and lots of assets very, very quickly and capture those in very high detail, then you're getting better data about all of the things that you need to worry about. Improved safety, we've covered from a few angles. Faster results. So interesting data point is from a survey perspective, we tend to cover in an hour what a survey team would cover in a day in terms of getting around large tracts of land, subdivisions, etc. So much faster results. Reduced costs, we've talked about quite a bit. So everyone will be familiar on the graph on the right, good, fast, cheap, pick two, and it normally says that the middle is not possible. You can't have all three. Well, with drones you can. You can have better, faster, cheaper, and safer. So as long as it's a good application for drones, it fits as a solution, then you can tick all of those boxes, and well suited to council in general as a macro client for drone data. So each of the departments within a council can normally get some really good benefits out of it. So what we find is when we can come in and present and have a Q&A session with people that are representing all of those departments, that's when the council gets the best result out of drone data. Whereas if you're just talking to the roads team, or you're just talking to the subdivision and property development guys, then sure, you're benefiting them, but it's better when everybody's aware of it. And it might be the case that while we're out on site doing something for the roads team, if we just gather a bit more data in a little bit of a different way, then that's also covering drainage or flooding or some asset management challenges in that area at the same time. So having a bit more of a holistic view of it can be really beneficial. I won't run through these in turn, don't worry, but everybody in the audience here will be able to see their particular issue or area of concern. So if any of those are of interest, catch up with us. We've got dozens of projects for each one of those that we can share with you and talk about savings and better results for each of those. And I've just added tender packages there in red. That's a real hot topic at the moment, something that we're realizing is very, very valuable. Being able to get in and capture a data package, which can go out as the basis for a tender. So by capturing the asset or the site, whatever it is that's going to have work done to it in incredibly high resolution detail and providing that out as part of the tender process, then all of those vendors get a consistent view of what it is. We're generally getting better data for them than they'd be able to get for themselves by visiting a site. And most importantly, from your perspective, it's a level playing field for everybody, and you don't have to host site visits by all of those different vendors. Just one site visit by the drone guys, get that package, send it out, level playing field, get the best responses back from that, and move ahead. And also then you can potentially base a lot of that work off that data package as well. So an accurate survey was done as part of that tender package. Not only can everybody see and measure what they need off it in order to present their tender, then they've got that data and they can get on with the project the day after it's awarded. So yeah, that whole concept of wrapping up a tender package with some great drone data is getting a lot of traction from our clients at the moment. Should you be doing drones in-house or with contractors? We get asked this question all the time, and the answer is both. So we talk about the 80-20 rule quite a bit. Do all the easy stuff yourselves. If you just need photos and video sort of showing off areas of council and that community engagement side of things, then yeah, absolutely do that yourself. You're not going to call in a contractor to just take a few photos for you. But it's when you get into the more complex or data focused work, that's probably when you want to have contractors involved. And also contractors can act as a consultants. So on those rules and regs and just feasibility of is such and such possible with drones. Unless it's your core business, you're probably not going to keep up with drone technology across the board. It's all moving very, very quickly, from the hardware that's actually flying in the sky and the software that's running on the computers dealing with all the data. So yeah, by having the consultants involved, you can get them to tackle the larger or trickier work, specialist equipment, thermal sensors and multi-spec sensors, etc., as well as sort of helping lead the charge on keeping up with that technology as it moves along. And the hardest part of tackling that drones within council is actually not the drones themselves, it's just dealing with the data. So how to turn gigabytes of information coming out of a drone into actionable GIS and CAD outputs. So that's a bit of a specialist thing. So that's normally when people really struggle. They go through training programs, they get taught how to fly drones, they don't get taught how to produce and verify accurate 3D surveys from the drones. There's not really anybody doing that sort of training. So yeah, the last point to talk about is just delving into that data thing a bit deeper. So we talk to people about drinking from the fire hose. If drones are able to capture an enormous amount of data very quickly and very efficiently, how are you going to make use and store and access those gigs and gigs of data? So when we started, it was quite acceptable to go out, take thousands of images and hand those over to a client on a USB stick. Things have moved on. That's not really best practice anymore. Here's 10,000 photos of roofs and good luck. So yeah, it's all moved to sort of data viewing and 3D modeling packages for this data. So what you're really looking for in a drone data solution is secure access in the cloud, and optionally offline as well if you're dealing with any sensitive data. So you can have the non-sensitive data in the cloud, or we deal with police and defense and things like that. So they've got a lot of data that needs to actually be segmented off. But yeah, where it can be in the cloud, that's just makes it easier for everybody. Easy access for all stakeholders just through a standard web browser. So you don't want to have powerful computers, specialist bits of software installed and training on that specialist software. You just want to make it all very, very easy. Just access through a standard web browser. That's absolutely 100% possible these days, and I'll give a bit of a demo in a moment. So if it's easy to do through a web browser, why would you do it any other way? You want that interface to be very, very intuitive for the easy stuff. So anybody should be able to jump in and very quickly be viewing, measuring, annotating and commenting on top of that data, and being able to share that back and forth with other departments or stakeholders for the project, so that everyone's looking at a common view and building up more information or commenting on top of that. You also want to be integrating with other systems, so avoiding the drone data being a silo. You want it talking to or feeding information to and from your asset management or work order systems, and just generally integrated into your business processes within council. You want to be able to layer in other data sources, so property boundaries, underground services, all sorts of things that are available through other data sources. If you can bring them all together and see that within the context of this high resolution 3D models, then sometimes you get some really interesting insights and just access to that information that might otherwise be very difficult. AI analysis. Unfortunately, this is a very overhyped area. That's still at the top of that hype curve that we were looking at earlier. Everyone's promising that AI can analyze everything, and the market is sort of expecting that to be true, but it's simply not. In 20 or 30 years, the computers will be able to analyze everything that humans can. There's not really any question that they will get there. The misconception is that how far down the line we are. We're at the very, very early days of AI analysis. So for certain types of defects on certain types of assets, that's all possible through automated analysis. So if the only thing you cared about was cracks in the roadway or compliance of line markings on the roadway, yeah, absolutely, that's possible. But generalized defects of building facades or roofs, yeah, a lot further down the way to just say to the system, hey, here's a bunch of images of something. Tell me what I should be worried about here. It will happen, but yeah, it's a long way down the track. But by having a cohesive and comprehensive way of storing and dealing and managing this massive amount of data, it means that as that technology evolves, it can start looking back through all this data and training and learning and gaining insights so that you can evolve very quickly to an automated analysis solution when it becomes available. But if you've got 1,000 different inspections just sitting on people's computer desktops, you're not really going to be able to bring the benefit to that from automated analysis as it starts to evolve. And we'll just jump out now and do a bit of a quick demo of the system that we've been developing to help our clients access all this data really easily. So here we have our 3D viewer. You can see various pins on the map. We can look all around. We'll just zoom in on one of these sites and take a quick look. So you'd be very familiar with top-down views of the world at this point. So you're probably used to that as your Google map view, and as you get closer and closer, you'll see it starts to get blurry and we lose details. But if we look up here at the drone data, you'll see it's sharper, and as we zoom in, it just gets more and more detail revealed as we go along. The most interesting part of that, though, is it's not just a top-down view, but full 3D data set. So you can look all around as if you were sort of on the ground or hovering over the site, and just look at any particular aspect of interest and look at it from all angles and take measurements and so on. So just again, that idea of a very comprehensive capture of every inch of the site, because you won't know exactly what you're looking for until later on. And then easily take measurements of anything from that data set, so compare to design drawings, measure gradients and levels and things like that. So the case here was actually a council site being developed, so new subdivisions going in, had some pretty serious drainage challenges here. So they needed to be sure that before these houses go in, that all those drainage issues were going to be solved, so that effectively checking that what has been built is exactly matching the design, so that if they get a lot of water coming through here, that they have that confidence that it's going to all flow through in the right way. So very good example of a council subdivision site, and just being able to capture all that data. Something that's sort of come up from a bunch of people that have seen this is, well, that's great, it was captured for that purpose, but you can also check in on a whole bunch of other things. So these properties, as they're being constructed, you can see what the contractor's up to, that they're not blocking the roadways, that everything's sort of safe and as expected there. There's a works depot here. You could look around and make sure that everything's tidy and safe, and there's no issues to the community. Primarily there's safety fencing all around, because if we look just over the road here, you can see cars in the driveway, bins out front. There's obviously people living in those properties when the development's happening just across the road. So just being able to see that everything is being done well and properly there. So that's a subdivision site. We'll just jump over to an asset as well. So this is a bridge. So it's a roads conference, but this is a rail bridge, but you'd imagine the same thing for a road bridge. This idea that you've got this asset which is very, very difficult to look at and inspect, but suddenly you make a 3D model out of it, and you can look at it from all angles. So being this sort of magic eye in the sky, drones can go out, capture all the data, and then back in the office you can spot things like why is there a bolt sitting on top of the pylon there? But then have a look and say, oh no, all the bolts are in the sleepers, so that must have just been left there during construction. It's a 3D model which is generally good enough to conduct the inspection off itself, but in our system it's always got the linked photo view from that as well. So if you bring up the photo view, it's matching the nearest photo to the 3D model, and then you can zoom in on that photo on top. And it's a 3D model. You can take measurements, you can leave annotation pins, and have a discussion with everybody about exactly what that issue or defect is and what needs doing about it. And then that's always located within this global GIS viewing environment, so you can see exactly where that asset is and how it sits in with the environment, how to access it, lots of things that you can instantly become visible once it's brought into a system like this. And just jump across to another example. I was talking about the tender packages earlier. This one's a water treatment plant, so lots of your councils would be looking after the water treatment and water utilities themselves. In this case, this was for a tender. Our client was putting in their tender application, and they wanted to visually show to the client what it was they were planning on doing. So we did a very high resolution survey of the whole site. So, down to the point where you could actually do a roof inspection off that data and see every little aspect all around the site. But what they wanted to do is just drop in their proposed designs and show the client exactly what they are thinking and the impact that would have. So for example, you'd need to relocate or knock down certain things, and even to the effect of earthworks. So if we zoom in here and we just turn on the original data, you can see this is what's there at the moment. In terms of the settling tanks and the ground level, and for the proposed design, they'd need to be doing some earthworks and cutting in, and you'd measure exactly the depth of that cut. Just being able to talk through these various options, so all these layers you can turn on and off and visualize one at a time what the options might be. So that was a good way of them getting across to their client what they were proposing. They did subsequently win the tender, and then the day after they're awarded, they can start work because they've got this very high detailed survey of exactly everything on site. They can do their measurements and designs and just crack on with it, rather than having to then negotiate how to send people out and get inducted and get access to the site to get that data. So a couple of examples there of the full 3D models inside this GIS viewing environment. I just want to show another format of presenting this sort of aerial data, not as full 3D models, which some people can find a little bit tricky to look around. If you've got community engagement, you don't want the senior citizens having to learn how to navigate in 3D, but being able to just simply drag to look around and then be able to jump to a different position based on those icons, and then zoom in and out to look all around. So that becomes just a very simple and intuitive bird's eye view over a project or a site that everybody can very easily and intuitively access. And just an example from literally where we are. So yesterday morning I took a couple of these panoramas. So you can see the conference center here. I can see that there's another capture point over there. On the map up the top right, you can see where you are and where you're looking. So if I jump over to this position, look back at the conference center here, this is where we're all sitting. So zoom in, you can see there's, I could do a closer inspection, but you can see there's some corrosion on the roof. And if you want to come talk to me during the breaks, I'm just down here near the coffee guys. So just showing the immediacy of this data. I could show up yesterday, capture this, and be able to show that to you in the presentation now. So that's a quick overview of all the stuff that can be done with drones and the different areas that we're working with Council. Keen to have a chat about how we might be able to work with yours as well. Thank you very much.